Afternoon all. Let's have a look now at a clash of the titans between Bulgaria and the Netherlands. Veselin Topalov 2752 in round 7 was playing Anish Giri. Very interesting game, this one. Veselin kicked off with knight f3. He's basically the second seed in the event, by the way, after Levon Aronian. Huge FIDE rating, 2752, but they're both mighty players. So d5 from Anish, keeping solid, okay, with classical occupation of the centre. So after d4, knight f6. After c4, not c6, you might expect c6, but e6 here. So inviting a queen's gambit declined type position. Knight c3. After bishop e7, you might expect bishop g5 here. But actually bishop f4 was chosen, which puts some pressure on the dark squares. It's eyeing e5. Note both of white's pieces are eyeing e5 here. But the dark squares in general could be a tempting strategy with the bishop on f4 to try and somehow lock them down. And look out for that in this game, how the dark squares, they are going to be locked down. After castles e3, we see knight bd7 from black, and you would expect white to continue maybe normally with a move like rook c1, maybe to delay the bishop just in case d takes c4 is going to get a tempo gain later. But no, a surprising move is played here. A surprising positional move. Can you guess what it is actually? So not a tactical move. Let's do a 10-second guess the move here, starting from now. Okay, c5. Now ordinarily c5 is not a good idea in many positions, because black can sometimes play e5 in return and break this structure. But here this structure cannot be undermined so easily. The bishop is pointing and keeping a lock and key on e5 here. Now, what Giri does in reaction to this is play knight e4, inviting him to have double pawns, but white's not interested in that. There'll be some dynamic compensation there for black. Let's have a quick look at that resulting position. It would seem, okay, even the c4 square might be tempting. You might think f5, bishop c4, queen b3, why not? Let's check this engine point of view. The problem is revealed actually. A quick e5 here might be the best thing for black to do. And then break white's, pawn chain with this. Okay, so we see black having good position. Queen d5 is very interesting as well, instead of the immediate bishop c5. So okay, no excuse can be given for black to play e5 here. Veselin carries on with queen c2. So the knight's got a decision here to take on c3 or to just be reinforced. Anish chose to reinforce it with f5, and we have a kind of Dutch stonewall structure here. Bishop d3, c6. Now in the Dutch stone wall, this bishop is often bad. e5 is often a sensitive square from black, and the dark squares in particular, especially if these dark square bishops are exchanged off. Okay, knight e5, bishop f6, then exchange of knights, so leaving black with just two bishops here. And now this knight is kicked, f3. After knight g5, again, a kind of surprising decision, I would say. A positional move. Can you guess it here? What did white play in this position? If I give you 10 seconds here. Okay. Bishop takes g5, and it's as if Veselin's going for a favourable kind of fortress position where calculating variations might be a waste of time. Maybe this is something he sensed in Anish Giri's games, that Anish is a very good calculator and shouldn't be given too many tactical opportunities. We get a locked in position. After f4, look at how locked the pawn chains are now. After bishop e7. I remember being on the black side in blitz in these kind of structures where white's kind of locked down at e5. And there aren't many opportunities really for counterplay. If you get them wrong, you can just have a bad position. So it's a kind of fortress without the knights, without obvious breaks. I mean, what are black's breaks? b6, g5? What are white's breaks though? You know, maybe g4 later in theory, or b4 b5 to try and break down black pawn structure. So it's interesting, the position strategically. Where are the breaks? What does black do with the two bishops? So white plays a3 here, and black goes for b6 undermining, and that's just reinforced with b4. And now we see g5, so undermining there as well. So those two which I've mentioned have just been used up here. So can black make the position more comfortable for his bishop pair? White keeps the fortress with g3. It looks really radical, and it's really a position where it doesn't seem as though calculation of variations is going to be significant, as significant as looking more generally maybe at the pawn structure and where you want the pieces here. Okay, black wants to use the g file maybe, and his next move gives that intention that maybe now rook g8 later could be useful. Bishop e2, now he opens up that g file, and white takes with the g pawn, keeping it symmetrical. So the pawn chain's still virtually symmetrical. Rook g8. And you might think, well, what about castling queenside? Castling queenside might run into a5. If we look at a5 here, I guess a5 is a move to consider if you're going to castle queenside. Might not be the strongest. Okay, maybe just taking here. And it looks a bit dangerous for white because of this a3. So in the game actually, well, Veselin, he wasn't tempted with castling queenside. Whoops, I think that's the end of Houdini for this session. When we get the board back, please. Board back. Let's close this. Uh-oh. Oh, we got a blank board for a moment. Pardon me. I'll just close the door. Take the opportunity to close the door. Okay. So what did Veselin do here? Another surprising move. King d2 is keeping his king in the centre. He has radically connected rooks. Can black use this g file, this entry point g2, or the bishop pair? It's interesting. And this locked-in pawn chain. Is this knight heading for anywhere of significance? Can it head for e5? Would that matter? Or is it more useful for a b5 break? Very interesting strategically, this position. Queen f8, as though, okay, the troops are coming down the g file, maybe queen h6. But how is this pawn chain going to be undermined? After rook ag1, we see black playing takes, and white takes again, to keeping symmetry. Taking with the b pawn, keeping these pawns now opposite each other, and these pawns are opposite each other. Rook b8. And now, a kind of change of mind, rook b1. And a pair of rooks come off. And now a radical breakout from black. He tries to solve the position tactically, but he's faced with this unpleasant b file here. So this was his intention in giving white that rook on b1. To play the radical e5. White now takes with the d pawn. If he takes with the f pawn, it looks as though this is going to be some big trouble for the white king. And lines. Well, pardon me. After f4, pardon me. This would set some difficult problems. It opens up the possibility also of maybe bishop f5, and rook g2 is always on the cards. So by taking with the d pawn, that seems to be a lesser evil. Black takes on c5, but we get this infiltration, rook b7, which is very annoying, that rook on the 7th. Bishop c8. and the rook now pins that bishop, and we see another breakout type of move, d4, breaking the chain a little bit, but sacking a pawn for a moment. After e takes d4, not bishop takes d4, but actually queen h6 is played, radically leaving the bishop en prise. What is going on here? We're going to have to work this out ourselves, because I don't trust the engine crashing, etc. If d takes check, maybe king d3, well, rook d8 looks slaughter time on king d3, and anything else, it looks as though rook g1 is pretty devastating. So this is probably why taking the bishops is probably a bad idea. This next move, queen a4, does a few things. It vacates c2 for the kings go to c2. It does still protect d4. Okay. And in fact, Anish is not keen on taking on f4 here, and then maybe taking on d4, which you might find surprising in this position. Why didn't Anish take on f4? Mystery question. Let's have a quick look. Queen takes f4. Let's go with king b1. Now bishop d4, say. Is this so easy to refute? Possibly queen takes c6 here is strong, because now there's a threat, a very strong threat of queen f6, but bishop e5. I think I'm going to have to risk turning on an engine here to work out this mystery. In the game, black played bishop b6. Let's just see what is going on here. If queen takes f4, king c2, bishop d4. Okay, it is queen c6. Now bishop e5, protecting f6. Oh, rook c8, of course. I was on the right track there. Just rook c8. Okay, that's a dangerous continuation if the queen does take on c6. There's a threatening check and then rook c8. So this is, Anish decided to just play bishop b6 here, leaving f4 for the taking next move. But the king evacuated anyway to c2. And we see now bishop e6, which sets up a little trap actually. If queen takes c6, I believe the trap is set of bishop b3 check, winning the queen. So that rules out that sort of variation, queen infiltration like that. Instead, also, by the way, the rook's attacks in any case, so it's not much of a trap. Something has to be done about the rook. And in fact, rook b7 is played. Now black does indeed take on f4. Now the question is, does white want black to take here? Well, actually he does something quite radical now. Veselin is known for exchange sacrifices. A very powerful part of his game actually, many exchange sacrifices. You could say he's a GM with exchange sackitis. But often you see many of his games, they do work out. And he plays an exchange sack here, rook takes b6, and it's logically founded. Let's look why. After queen takes c6, he has already got a pawn for the exchange. And the two pawns in the centre, if they rolled forward, this would be pretty menacing, you can imagine. Okay, and if he gets to f6, that will be a nasty pin with, rook g7 looks like a horrible move to have to play. So black avoids the possibility of queen f6. He plays rook g6. But now the pawns roll forward a bit, d5. We seem to have big compensation here. So what can black do? He plays bishop g8. And then we see e6, which opens up actually potentially this diagonal. And now there's a really cruel set of moves coming up. Queen e5, okay. Queen takes b6, casually creating another pass pawn. So two pawns for the exchange. Rook g2, and now there's a super cruel move which emphasizes white's trump cards of these central pawns. and extinguishes virtually black's potential for meaningful counterplay. I wonder if you can guess it here if I give you 10 seconds here, and I'll try and show you why another move would give black counterplay. So 10 seconds starting from now. How do you try and protect e2 and stop black generally having some counterplay? Okay. Well, black's counterplay, if you play king d2, no, because f4 and there's frets, it's harder than it needs to be. What white plays is a beautiful move in this position, knowing that if it can get the queens off, these two pawns are going to be more pronounced. There's going to be less blockade opportunities. The queen will be one less blockader. He plays king d3, not only protecting e2, but introducing queen d4 to exchange off queens. This is a very difficult position now for black. His bishop's obviously hemmed in by these pawns where they stand. What can black do? Anish tries rook takes h2 to try and maybe get some more checks going. But we see this powerful queen d4. Now once the queens are coming off, if this is allowed, well, aren't these two pawns real runners? Check. And the queens do come off here. What else can black do? There's no tactic here that helps. So he takes off the queens, and we're left with this situation. It's just one pawn for the exchange, but look how advanced these pawns are in the centre. e7 and d6 looks an absolute menace, but can the king come to the rescue as a blockader? Anish plays king g7. But we see e7. Okay. And the king is reluctant to be used as a blockader here. Perhaps he's thinking if king f7, then d6, and already setting up bishop c4. And if king e8, then there's bishop b5 check. How can the king be a useful blockader here? So Anish tries bishop f7. And we see d6 with the menacing threat of d7. We see check. King e5. Okay, bishop e8, setting up the blockade again. And then the blockader is exchanged off, bishop b5. And we see also a cruel idea, maybe if needed d7, but black takes on b5 here. Knight takes b5 and tries the blockade again. But now knight c7, simply threatening e8, queening, check. Giving up f5, so back to being two pawns for the exchange down. Attacking the rook, rook e1. I think white's just winning wherever way he wants now. He doesn't immediately play e8, he just plays a4. And black resigned here. It's just hopeless. This a pawn is winning, if nothing else, surely. So black resigned here. If h5, white can maybe just continue with a5, but let's see the most incisive. Just to make sure this h pawn, I'm not going to embarrass myself messing up this position. I think either a5 or e8 still winning. So it takes. We get this position, and now a5, and there's not enough time, is there, to do something about the pawn. The a pawn's already too far, even if d6 is given up. So okay, it was an interesting game, I thought, and it's almost like showing that sometimes a good option is to set up a kind of favourable, slightly favourable fortress position, locking down key squares. And it looks as though black trying to get rid of this fortress type position quite radically. So this lockdown of both pawn chains, and white keeping the pawn chain symmetrical on both sides. When given the option of capturing, it chooses g takes, keeping the pawn structure symmetrical on both sides. And then later on we see b takes, keeping again the symmetry. And no, black's really trying a violent breakout now with this rook takes b1, e5, very violent. Try and liberate his bishop pair. and his dark square bishop in particular. But okay, white played in a very cool way here after queen h6. This queen a4. This queen a4 is just multi-purpose, protecting d4, attacking c6, and giving c2 for the king. But further than that, we see that the more useful bishop is exchanged off with this exchange sacrifice very shortly. After queen takes f4, white goes for the exchange sack here, and very dangerous threats here, meaning that the bishop's now imprisoned by that e6 pawn, and now we get this very interesting and powerful king d3 move, just calmly trying to exchange off the queens to really emphasize again these centre pawns. So we see the centre pawns now just being fully emphasized, and then the blockade are exchanged off. If king f7, actually let's mention king f7 here. What would happen there on king f7 as an alternative? Take king e6. Is that a move? King e6 was rook h6 check. White has to be careful. Knight d5. So that introduces knight f6 and knight c7. So say check, there's knight f6 and knight c7. It's difficult to stop both. So this is clearly winning for white, just queens there. So it's pretty hopeless after bishop b5. So just taking a knight d5 if king f7. So he plays bishop takes b5, and again this knight's just playing a pivotal role for this e-pawn to be a winning e-pawn. a4 played calmly, and now black resigned. Interesting game. The exchange sack master Topalov does it again. Okay. Comments or questions on YouTube? The match score though, Netherlands did well to win the match. They had 2 wins lower down and 1 draw, so they managed to beat the very strong Bulgarian team, but this was the board 1 clash. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.